Imagine having the freedom to take a 1 month vacation without having to worry about household chores or work. I know that sounds impossible, but it's really not. Today, we're going to explore how parents can apply the principles from the 4-hour work week to achieve a more balanced and fulfilling life. In this episode, you'll discover how you can break free from the overwhelm and focus on what truly matters. Welcome back, my friends, to Fulfillment Therapy. I'm your host, Kendra Nielsen, and today we're exploring ways to enhance mental health, wellness, and life fulfillment. We're going to talk about a book that I am loving by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Workweek. And I'm sure many of you have heard about this before. It's pretty famous. It's been out for several years, but the concepts still apply. And really, they apply to families as well. So I want to explore how this book for entrepreneurs applies to families. I want to start by having you imagine taking this 1 month vacation without things falling apart. My client did this when I shared this book with her, and she started to apply the principles. And she automated so many of the tasks in her life and outsourced other things that she didn't think she could, like household chores and errands and those types of things, and freed up a lot of time for herself and for her family and for her personal growth. And the crazy thing is that she's just a normal person. It's not something that all of us can't do to one degree or another. So the big question is, how did she do it? I'm going to briefly explain some of the ways that she made this happen and how you can apply this to your parenting or business journey yourself. Let's first talk about lifestyle design. This is creating a life that aligns with your priorities, with your values. For example, a big reason why I started my own business was because I wanted a more flexible schedule where somebody wasn't telling me how to do things, so I could be more available for my family and so I could have that creative outlet. So I created a life that aligns with those priorities. Now, in Tim Ferriss's book, he encourages us to question those traditional norms and focus on what truly matters. I find that I go back to that over and over again. When people tell me it can't be done, I often say, why? And is that really accurate? And I love that Tim Ferriss was a forerunner in this, and now everybody is showing that there is so much space for flexibility and exactly what you want if you're willing to learn and if you're willing to question some of those cultural norms that are just not serving you and they're not accurate. So for parents, this might mean setting aside a dedicated family time or pursuing hobbies that maybe they felt like they couldn't do before. What we fear doing most is usually what we most need to do. For me, I would say one of my bigger fears is getting in a situation where there would be a financial setback because of my desire for education or adventure, and it could potentially harm my family. But it could be very different for you. What is your biggest fear? I had another client that redesigned his schedule to include family game nights and being more available to help with coaching with his kids. Simple little shifts that he didn't think he could ever do, but he started to set boundaries, advocate for himself, reevaluate his work culture, and really explore if his job would truly be in jeopardy or if that was just a fear that he had that probably wouldn't come to pass. So we broke it down and we challenged some of those fears and we worked through them, and then he went and advocated for himself. And we can all do that in different ways, whether it's in the work field, whether it's with our spouse, whether it's any of our commitments in any areas we're responsible for, whether that be volunteer work, church work, whatever that is. I was listening to his book again this morning and reviewing one part of it, and there's this principle that I really like that he talks about called the Pareto Principle. And that's the 80-20 rule, essentially. So this teaches that 80% of results come from 20% of efforts. This is so simple when you break it down, but really life-changing when you think of what that means. When we focus on high-impact tasks and eliminate those low-value activities, we can achieve so much more with less effort, and this applies to parenting. It totally applies to parenting and applies to our careers if you have one. It applies to our personal lives. It applies to everything. For example, instead of spending hours on household chores, maybe you could outsource some of that and automate some of those things like laundry or meal prep. This allows us to prioritize what truly adds value to our life. Now, I know when I was listening to this, I'm like, I can't outsource that. We have to do that. I have to teach my kids that, or What would people think? I don't spend a lot of time thinking that, but every once in a while, a thought will come through my mind. And I challenge that a little bit. Do I really care what people think if maybe a cleaning lady showed up and they saw her van? Or do I care more about not having to do those things? Now, I haven't done that yet, but I've been considering that more. Like, how much is that worth? And if I were to instead spend that time coaching somebody or doing a therapy session, how much more I could get paid for that and not have to do those tedious tasks? And that could be many things. He shares so many examples of his book too, where he ended up going and living somewhere for a month and has example after example of how it is not what we think it is in our head. It's so much more expensive or improbable. For example, many of the people in there were able to pay somebody for less than $40 a week to cook meals for them. And I was thinking, man, that is totally worth it. Now, that might just be for one person. I don't know. I haven't explored that enough yet. But I do know the more people that I talk to, the more you discover that things are not as impossible as they seem. And that is so exciting if you just get really efficient. And I feel like that's what his book is especially about. Are you going to work harder or are you going to work smarter? And it's about being efficient and smart and getting things really dialed in for that 20% effort. Remember, 20% of your efforts can go into 80% of the results. And again, that includes our home. That includes our parenting and all of these things. Like, how can we maximize that time in a way so everyone thrives? The third point I want to talk about today is automation and outsourcing, which I addressed a little bit already. This also significantly reduces our workload. You can hire virtual assistants at a very cheap price and personal assistants at just a little bit more. It is not as bad as you think, especially if you hire somebody from another country. And he talks about that in his book as well, like shocking prices. You can also schedule appointments using your smart home devices. There's so many ways to automate things now, especially with AI take. It is pretty ridiculous that we don't spend more time making it more efficient. Like, even if we just paused our life for 2 weeks and simply focused on making things more efficient and working less, how much time that would save us in the long run. Heather Schuck said, "You will never feel truly satisfied by work until you are satisfied by life." And I'm finding that myself. I've put my heart and soul into starting these businesses and I've loved it. And I'm starting to get a little bit run down because I'm still having boundaries and being available when the kids get home. But sometimes mentally, I'm just not very present because I have been in massive creation mode for so long. And I love that part. But I also don't want to be too worn down either. And the intention was never to do that. But now that I have a lot of those systems in place, now I just want to really dial in those systems, whether it's in my home or in my business, and get really efficient. So I have dedicated the next 6 months to really streamline my life and focus on that 80-20 rule, where 80% of my results come from 20% of my efforts, and start to outsource more, try to automate everything I can in my life. Automation is beautiful. Something as simple as auto pay on all those different bills and getting help if I need it. Even if you're just a stay-at-home mom, but you find yourself very overwhelmed with all these different things, even consider doing a virtual assistant to help with some of those things, especially if you struggle with admin work or getting bogged down by different things. They can read your emails. They can do everything from social media posting to all of that stuff. And in a relatively simple, cheap way, should you want it. So challenge those beliefs that you have that say it's not possible, or I couldn't do that, or what would people think? Any of those typical ones that our minds go to, and instead think, what kind of home environment do I want to have? What do I value most? And how can I create that if I pause my life for a little bit? And if I really focus on efficiency and automation and outsourcing. And now you have AI that you can just ask all sorts of questions. How do I make this automated? How do I outsource this? What are the cheapest ways to do this? What are the best out-of-country ways to do this? And about how much would I pay? How much would I pay for in-country? There's just so many opportunities now, and there's no room for excuse anymore. The next point I want to talk about briefly is mini retirements. I love this concept that he talks about in his book. And this is where you take regular breaks to recharge and explore new experiences, which I'm all about since I'm so into adventure. And for parents, this might mean planning a weekend getaway or a family vacation. These help prevent burnout and foster that personal growth. Jane Parks said, "When I think about work-life balance, I don't imagine it as a perfect day. But over the course of a month, a quarter, or a year, I try to make time for the people and experiences I value." So it doesn't have to be this really perfectly designed day or vacation, but it can be these intentional things that you do throughout the year to connect with others. It can look different for each of us. Now let's talk about location independence. This is what I'm very passionate about, and I'm so excited for this next stage of my life to have this be more a part of it. This is where you can work from anywhere and have that flexibility for your family and for time and for travel. Tim Ferriss in his book talks a lot about this, the remote working options and leveraging technology to manage responsibilities from anywhere. And he pushes back against every excuse in the book because it's so easy now to do this. One of my clients transitioned to working remotely, and this allowed her to attend all of her kids' events when she hadn't been able to for years with work. And this is something most of us can do now. Even if you think you can't, he tells you in the book ways to break it down, to push back a little bit in a respectful way that actually works so that you can get something like that in your work environment. So if you haven't read this book, I would encourage you to go read it. It just gives you hope that there is so much more available that maybe you didn't think about before, or you bought into the culture that things couldn't be a certain way and you just accepted that. I just want to briefly recap some of those points that we talked about from the 4-hour work week today. Here are the key takeaways for those overwhelmed parents that are looking for more fulfillment. The first one is lifestyle design. So align your life with priorities to achieve that greater fulfillment. What is it that you truly want most? And lean into that a little bit. Explore how you might be able to get that. The next thing is the Pareto Principle, or the 80-20 rule. Focus on those high-impact tasks to maximize your efficiency. And then automation and outsourcing. Use technology. There's so much available. And use that assistance to reduce your workload and forget about what other people think. The next one is those mini retirements. Taking regular breaks can prevent that burnout and foster growth. And you don't have to wait till you're retired or wait till you're in your 60s to enjoy life. You can start enjoying it now. Now, that doesn't mean you have to get yourself in a terrible financial situation if you want to do it. You'll make it a priority and you'll do the research. You'll explore ways to do it and you realize it's easier than you ever thought it was. You just never put the time into it and you bought into what other people were saying. Last but not least, that location independence. You can leverage all the changes that have happened since COVID, and you can often have location independence so that you can be more flexible and available for your family if that's your priority. Go back to the story of my client in the beginning. When we implement the things that Tim Ferriss talked about in his book, now let's go back to my client's story from the beginning. She not only took a month-long vacation when she started to apply these principles, but she also found more time for her family and her personal passions. Like, she's loved art, for example. She started taking art classes. She's been traveling like crazy and doing this with a family. And it became a testament of how doing less is sometimes more if you really dial in that efficiency and take the time to slow down to get that more dialed in so that you can have a more fulfilling life now instead of when you are retired or when you can't enjoy your kids anymore. There are so many fallacies, there's so many lies that we tell ourselves, and they're in every realm. Like, I have stay-at-home moms tell me, I can't go to work because then I won't be available for my kids. There's ways you can challenge that, and I don't see that as being true for many of my clients. Or I can't work from home. It wouldn't work. I challenge that with people, and often that is not true. Sometimes it's true, but it's often not true. Or I can't send my kids to public school because then I won't be a good mom. Sometimes that's true, and often it's not true. So exploring that and choosing the life that you want, not based on what you've been told or what the culture around you is saying, but creating your own family culture in the way that resonates with you and seeking to build that life in a way that will further your personal and family fulfillment. All right, my friends, that is all I have for you today. Don't forget that we have new episodes every Monday and Thursday that will help you take your personal and family fulfillment to the next level. I'll see you back here in just a few days. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you, no matter what your house or your hair looks like. I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.